Let me read to you a passage from the 13th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 47 to 53. It's the Gospel for Thursday of the 17th week in Ordinary Time. St. Matthew writes, Jesus said, "Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." "Have you understood all these things?" Jesus asked. "Yes," they replied. He said to them, "Therefore every teacher of the law who has been instructed about the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old." When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. That's from Matthew chapter 13, verses 47 to 53. What does it suggest to us? Well, one of the features of life as a member of Christ's faithful is disillusionment. By that I mean that any member of the church, be he lay member or consecrated religious or in holy orders, may well experience serious disappointment in his experience of others in the church. He or she will expect kindness, justice, considerable moral probity, spirituality and many other Christ-like virtues in those with whom he is involved in the life of the church. And in at least some, he will encounter the very opposite. Not only will this be unedifying to him, not only will this leave him ashamed of some of his co-religionists, but it may well involve his being seriously hurt by them. He himself could be left wounded by injustice and lack of consideration, and his experience of the church could leave him disillusioned. He expected much more and received far less. Further, this evident fact of sin in the church may well disillusion those outside the church. Where it is present, it will disfigure the witness the church gives to Christ. It makes the church less credible. You know, one of the greatest religious minds of the Victorian age in England was Cardinal Newman. Raised as an Anglican, he powered the Oxford movement of the 1830s, and finally in 1845 he entered the Catholic Church. During the heyday of his prominence as an Anglican, one of the many objections he saw in the Catholic Church was, as he deemed it at the time, its lack of holiness. He required of it a much greater holiness if it was ever to be considered the true Church of Christ. As an outsider, he saw too much sin in it for its claims to be convincing. In due course he overcame that objection by other considerations. Nevertheless, it is a genuine problem for those both inside and outside the church which Christ founded. So what are we to say of the bad that is undoubtedly in the church? Does it discount the good and invalidate it as the abode of Christ? Is it possible that Christ be the mystical head of the body that is partially diseased? Well, in our Gospel today, our Lord describes the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is God's rule here on earth. Our Lord is describing the church, which is the seed and the locale here on earth of God's lordship. The church consisting of Christ the head and the faithful who are his members. What does our Lord say of it, the church? It consists of the good and the bad. As we heard in the Gospel that I read earlier, once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. So the church includes all kinds of fish. and at the end there will be a separation of the good and the bad. The good fish will be kept, and the bad thrown away. God does not fill up his church simply with good fish. Our Lord told another parable elsewhere. This time the image was of a farmer who sowed good seed, but an enemy came by night and sowed lots of weeds with the good seed. The farmer did not pull up the weeds when they came to light. He left the separation of good and bad till harvest time. Even during our Lord's public ministry, we see the good and the bad among our Lord's followers. Most spectacularly in the case of Judas. Judas was called by Christ to follow him closely, but at the time of his declaration of the doctrine of the Eucharist, he referred to Judas as a devil. Among the wider circle of our Lord's followers, we read that many left him when he taught the doctrine of the Eucharist. We read that at the end of the 6th chapter of St. John, about Judas, I mean. Indeed, it was one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, who facilitated the betrayal and passion of Christ. All this is a pointer to the pattern evident age after age in the history of the Church. There is good and there is bad among her members. It will only be at the end of time, when Christ judges the good and the bad, will the Church be filled with those who are good. Then there will never be any disillusionment in heaven. Let us remember this. When we are hurt by the bad in the Church, in all probability, others in the Church have been hurt by bad in us. They too have probably been disillusioned. And with us. Let us remember another thing. Every time we think of someone who has hurt us, if he is saved, as one would hope that he will be, then in heaven we shall be glad to be with him and will delight in his company. By then he will be purified of his sins, and so will we be. We shall delight to be in one another's company. If we refuse this thought, well, to that extent we shall be delaying our own entry into heaven, because Christ demands forgiveness if we are to be forgiven.